Okay, so there used to be this older couple that I knew when I lived in Montana. Um, I kind of used them as like surrogate grandparents. Um, because um, well, my grandparents died in 2017, but I met these people in 2014. And I felt like I could communicate with them better than my actual grandparents. They were probably about the same age, still are, but they're still alive. Um, and they could be, I don't know, 5 years younger than my grandparents, but um, at one point, the older woman asked me after my son was born if I needed anything. And me being me, I just said what I needed. I'm like, a car. And she's like, well, I can't, a car? I'm like, yeah, I mean, if you like find a car that's cheap, let me know, or one that I can make payments on. I didn't have good credit at this point because I destroyed it very quickly after I got out of my relationship with my ex husband. I didn't realize how quickly credit could be destroyed. But, yeah. It's really hurtful to me. Like, I would talk to these people over like a number of years while I was taking care of my son. I would kind of tell her my feelings about things, and she was with this group called Recovery International. It's like a mental health self help group. We would meet at the library in Missoula at this point in time. Sometimes there were phone meetings, but I barely attended those. I guess I just always felt and understood that this woman was like keeping a distance from me, but I always kind of, with everybody in my life, pretended that wasn't happening. And that was like the closest to love I could get. So I would contact her sometimes, and she would say she really liked hearing from me. I would always kind of keep the conversations positive, and she would give me lots of compliments and affirmations because that was kind of her thing. But I'd always get off the phone feeling kind of like emptier and like, why did I seek this person's validation when she doesn't really like care about me? I think she liked me in a way because I'm intelligent, and I would kind of say kind of revolutionary things about mental health or something, or state of mind, or whatever, some of which I'd heard from my ex-husband, but it's not like she knew that. Some of it, was something I thought about because I'm always philosophizing in my head about ways to fix things. But sometimes it's a distraction from like actually going in and seeing what the thing is, like a cover up. Anyways, so I'd talk to her. It's just like whenever I would bring up like some idea I had about something I wanted to do, like be a leader for some group, or one time I played music for them at their house. Their friends really liked it and looked at me like I was remarkable, but they didn't say a thing, and never supported me, so I never brought up music to them again. Um, Over time, they stopped like inviting me to their house because they used to invite me for get-togethers they were having. Um, there was a year gap at the point where I thought I was Rebecca because I probably have dissociative identity stuff going on. Um, yeah, I feel like I'm basically the same person most of the time. But, so, yeah. It's hard to tell the story without saying her name, but I feel like that'd be impolite. Um, so when the guy I was dating, um, who is like an opiate addict, when he tried to stop me from leaving the apartment, this was after he had said someone was going to murder me, which kept like devolving in my head to he's gonna murder me, which neither here nor there may be true, but that's where I was at. So we're having some argument after I've like cleaned up like the entire apartment from like well, I've been cleaning out a room so I could like make it more my own in the apartment, because he said he wanted me to stay, but I felt trapped. So I was like, this is the only way I can stay here, is if I can be in this room and away from him. So the way I clean and organize is I kind of make a bit of a mess first and then clean it up kind of days at a time as I have energy. Disorder turns into order over time. That's just my way. So I had like made it cleaner even though I wasn't really ready to put things away. So I'd stayed up all night making sure it was clean so he wouldn't give me shit. And I made him breakfast and I put it in front of him, and he still like treated me like shit, like things are disorganized and he's dissatisfied. And I said, can't you ever think about me? To which he kind of glared or something. Maybe because he realized I was figuring out how little he cared about me. But it's like within, I think that day we had an argument. I came back, I was at the apartment for 2 days, and then I had kind of given up on the whole relationship at this point. I just hadn't left. I was sitting across from him on the opposite side of the table as the 2 days before, and he tried to start something with me about how I wasn't doing the right things in the apartment, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I don't want to fight. And he's like, neither do I. That wasn't true, because I got up and tried to leave the house. And he grabbed my wrists and blocked the door with his body. And I am stronger than him, although he's taller than me. He's a lot older than me and he was very weak. But I have like sensitive wrists because I'm double jointed. So I didn't really want to hurt myself. So I said to him, you always pretend you're so fucking weak. Because I would do like the brunt of labor and things around the house. You know, he never grabbed my wrist like that. Because he was lazy. But yeah. So then, well, he kind of looked at me like, what? You realized that I was faking this whole time? You know, because that comment kind of caught him off guard. I had my instruments on my back because that's what was important to me. And I like flung around him with the instruments and opened the door. After I got my wrists out of his hands, which again wouldn't have been hard, I just didn't want to hurt myself. He grabs like the instruments that I have on my back, and I pull maybe 2 or 3 times and get the instruments out of his hand and go to my car. For me, like, bruises take about like 3 days to show up on my body sometimes. So I left the house with the instruments, this time pretty fucking freaked out, because I really didn't know, like, how bad the abuse would, like, get with him. Yeah. I didn't know, like, why, if he was so pissed with me, he wanted me in the house anyway. And I certainly didn't want to be there, because at this point it would have just been like being trapped like some surrogate sex slave or something. There was nothing for me there. There wasn't love, there wasn't care, there wasn't respect, there wasn't anything. At one point when the relationship started, I guess you could call it, he love bombed me. That quickly went away, and he became pretty disinterested in my presence. But he was lonely, and I was scared of being alone. So, that's kind of how that started. I don't know. He would just kind of tear me down every chance I got. It's just I've already been through that with another man, so what I did this time was like built myself up and learned from it until I was strong enough to leave, instead of like being weaker at the end of the relationship. Not that I didn't have to recover at all. My identity was still like a bit shattered, and still somewhat is, but I did learn a lot about self-respect through that relationship. Yeah. I had tended to always get with men who were like my mother and my father, some combination of people who didn't really acknowledge or care about me to some degree. Yeah, so anyways, I left the apartment after this domestic incident, and I still needed my stuff, so I don't know, I drove around for a while until dark. Maybe I visited my mom, I don't know. At that point, she was fine with me, I guess, because she liked seeing me in crisis. I don't know, she can kind of like care about me somewhat when there's an emergency, but she kind of always feels uncomfortable around me. But anyways, at this point, the effects of her weren't so damaging to me, so maybe I visited her. Yeah, I came back and I, turned the key, went inside into that room. He was sleeping at this point. I sat in that room for a while trying to decide what to do, fucking freaked out. I had moved a lot of my stuff into the room at this point. I had like a week or two worth of clothes in there. And a dress I had bought for like $300 that I knew I was just going to return because I needed money. But that was kind of how I would save money, was to buy shit and return it. And keep the receipts, because otherwise I would spend the money. I didn't have super good money management skills. But, yeah. So I call the police, and they say, well, we can wake him up and corroborate the story. And they don't see the bruises on my arms because they're not there yet, but I know, like, where he touched me, and they show up, like, because he had also grabbed my arms, not just my wrists. They show up a few days later, and I go to the police station and casually tell the police officer, like, I have the bruises. He doesn't really give a shit, and I'm like, I'm not gonna. I have better things to do than, like, fight for someone to acknowledge that something happened to me. You know, I know what happened. Whatever. So I tell, like, the police officers the whole story and how I'm afraid of him, how it reminds me of when I was 5 and I didn't say this, but one of the police officers I could tell was like an empath and could see things like I do. In my mind, I saw like where I was trapped in a basement when I was 5. And he like almost started crying. He was cool, but the other police officer was like in charge. So when the other police officer stepped away for a minute, I was like, I didn't want them to go in and wake, you know, my former partner up, because I wouldn't have been able to get my stuff out of there. I was kind of asking if they could just stick around while I got my stuff, but that wasn't really an option. And I asked if they could, like, if there was a place I could stay. And they mentioned, like, the homeless shelter across the street. And I'm like, I've worked there. I know what happens in there. Just not a place where I belong. I'm not saying anything about homeless people. I really care about homeless people. It just wasn't somewhere where I was going to stay. So, anyways, the policemen leave. The kind police officer says sorry. He's referring to his partner and that they really can't help me with anything. So I go in the house, afraid for my life, and grab, I think, 2 loads of things, put them in my car. And that's when I went to show up at the older couple's house who I'd known for 5 years. It was the middle of the night. I had driven around and around and around, trying to make it a little earlier in the morning, like 2 or 3 a.m., so that they wouldn't be as bothered. Anyways, they really didn't want me there. And I said, I just need somewhere to sleep. And kind of went in their home. And in the morning, they were pretty nice to me. But when I showed up back in the evening, well, they really didn't want me there in the first place. And she was like, why didn't you just wait till the morning and stay in your car? Is that a normal question that someone would ask if they actually cared about you? I don't think so. Basically, I hadn't done that because I wanted to check if they actually cared about me. Which, it became pretty evident they didn't. I told her multiple times I have ulcerative colitis, but she made some snarky comment about how I didn't eat all the food on the plate. And then when I took an extra shower because I'd been running around all day in my car that has no air conditioning, you know. And I just can't deal with my skin being that uncomfortable. I can't even sleep because I have dry skin. I didn't bother to, like, complain to them about all my physical symptoms. I knew they wouldn't care. I just said I was going to take another shower. And her husband makes a rude comment towards me about using water. And by this point, I had brought a bunch of my stuff down to the basement where they were going to let me sleep. And I was like, I don't want to sleep in the fucking basement. They have like 2 other rooms upstairs. I don't know what the fucking point of this is. It's like they were trying to relegate me to some place where they could pretend I didn't exist. And plus, there was cat hair all over the bed, so I was like, there's no fucking way I can sleep here because of my skin. So, if you've never had skin that gets easily irritated, you wouldn't really understand this. But, So I go back upstairs after deciding I'm not taking this shit. Bring all my stuff out to the front porch, leave the door open, and her husband comes up to me and says, "Don't leave the door open, the heat, blah, 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 blah." And I'm like, I get that there's tension. I'm leaving. And I guess this was when I started to set boundaries for myself. I'd done it to some extent before, but this was a pretty important moment. He walks away kind of huffing and puffing. Like he actually gave a shit if I was there anyway. Like they gave a shit what had happened to me. Or like how terrified I was. That I was like basically going to be killed by my partner. I didn't know. That's what it felt like. And I say to the older woman, I'm like, "Do you think I'm stupid?" Indicating, do they think I don't know how they feel about me being there? And she says, "No, I think you're brilliant." I was like, okay, that's interesting in my head. Some sort of validation, I guess. But, and she says, "Why?" And she's like, "What happened with your partner? Whatever, why did you leave?" And I explained that he had stopped me from leaving the house, which she apparently didn't think was that big of a deal. And I proceeded to complain to her about her husband treating me like shit. I didn't really address what she'd done, but I don't really remember the rest of the conversation. She's like, "Where are you gonna go?" I'm like, "I don't know. I'd go to a hotel for a night. I could sleep in my car. Maybe I'll go to my mom's. Whatever." Like she really fucking cared. You know, I don't want to stay where I'm not welcome or where kindness to me is not given. I guess I just wanted to, like, once and for all check if they actually cared about me. Maybe the way I did it was drastic. It was like kind of the only place I had to go. But that didn't really matter to them. I was interrupting their perfect existence. I'm just done with people not caring about me, you know? If I'm like a side character in their life, I'm just gonna disappear.